What's going on, beautiful people? We're back with another episode of Getting Crazy with Crazy Wheels. And today we have a special episode with my friend Elizabeth. And this is going to be for people without kids. So get the kids out the room because we're going to talk about the wonderful life of sex and living with a disability and how we overcome some of those issues. So right now I'm going to bring Elizabeth on and let her introduce herself and talk a little bit about what she does. Hey Elizabeth, how you doing? Turn your mic on.
I did. Hi everyone. My name's Danielle Elizabeth Napoli. I'm a mental health therapist. I got my mental health counseling degree at University of Rochester, and I'm currently getting my doctorate degree at Mcruer State University. I was in a car accident in 2008, which gave me a lovely spinal cord injury, and so I'm in a wheelchair now. Living my fabulous life and studying sexual experiences of all of us fabulous people with any physical disability.
Okay.
I don't know how that was, but we'll go from there.
That's what I was gonna ask you. How did you get into this work, and what do you hope to get out of the work? Like, what do you hope to do with it?
Yeah, so I got into this work because after my accident, anytime I went out with friends or anything, I always got asked, even before what my name was, can you have sex? And I just kept saying to all my friends, I'm just gonna have to write a book and start handing that out and be like, educate yourself. And then come back to me and let's have a conversation. I just felt, I felt really embarrassed and almost like I lost a part of my identity, and I wanted to help other people. And then I was like, I can't be the only one going through this and feeling this way. So I kind of I went back to school for therapy. And then I am pursuing my sex therapy license and sex education license. And then I decided, okay, well, what else can I do? And then went for my doctorate because, why not just be a forever student? I love learning. And see if I can kind of advance this even further and get academia into kind of studying this and changing the narrative and amplifying disabled voices. That's, I guess, my goal.
Awesome. Talk about an experience where you had to get creative in a sexual situation for your partner to better understand you and to help you. And how did you overcome that experience? Like where maybe they didn't understand you, and how did you make them comfortable while explaining to them how to help you?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think sometimes I even knew. So I think the whole point of me going out and exploring my sexuality after my accident was just also me getting to know how my body reacts to different things. Like, where do sensations diminish for me? Where do they heighten? Where are they kind of neutral? Um, how is my brain reacting to this? And I think that helped me kind of navigate my experiences with other people. So I'm not quite sure if it was so much of like, how did I teach them? I think it was just a mutual. I mean, I'm pretty straightforward. I think you kind of know that about me. So I'm always going in there with like communication. I need to communicate. I had to be vulnerable in some instances, right? Because this is like a whole new body that I'm learning. And so it's like, are you willing to kind of learn and explore this with me? And how can we make this fun? And that was kind of my approach, I believe,
Oh,
after
cool.
my accident to like navigating my own sexual pleasure.
Yeah, and that's where we're kind of the same. I'm kind of outspoken. If I'm in a situation, I'm like, hey, just do this or do that. So you have to be very communicative when you're in a situation like that. It doesn't matter whether you're in a sexual situation or anybody listening. It could be a situation where you gotta go to the bathroom, you gotta have a helper on that knee. So talk
Mhm.
about a funny situation, maybe where it was a little unique or a little awkward, but you kind of added humor to the situation where you and your partner had to work it out, where you both didn't know what to do, but by communicating and adding humor to the situation, you kind of got through that situation.
Oh my gosh. So I was in an accident in 2008, and then I met my current husband in, oh my God, he's gonna, if he hears this and I get it wrong, I'm like the worst with dates. I want to say like 2018. We're just gonna go with 2018, maybe 19. And this was the first time, and I knew this could happen. Okay, I knew this could happen, but this happened to be the first time that it actually happened while I was like with someone and not just like by myself exploring. And so, you know, we were we were engaging in sex, and it just happened to be like penetration, and all of a sudden I had an accident and I shit myself, and I was like, stop it. I'm like, do you smell something? And he's like, yeah. And then I was like, do you want to stop? And he's like, nope. And so I'm like, okay. And he's like, to yell, it's fine. Like shit happens. And I think like just the fact that he said that and that literally just happened, I was like, okay, cool. I love this man. Like we're just letting things roll, just kind of figuring it out as we go. And then like, I mean, eventually we stopped and I cleaned myself up and everything like that. But it was the first time, and I'm just like, how is he going to react to this? Like, we already talked about how this could be a possibility. My BOW programs are always regular. So, again, like, this was the first time that this happened in like, I don't know, 15 years, like a really long time. Right. And um, I was besides myself, but I think he made me feel so comfortable, and I feel so privileged to have had that experience like with him at the time and it not be with one of the other people that I've experimented with, right? Because I feel like that could have gone very differently. So I do feel very fortunate that it happened when it happened and who it happened with.
Okay, so how many times did you have sex before this? Was this the first time where you had sex, or have you had other issues? I mean, not issues, but experiences before this?
Yeah, I had a lot of experiences before this. I was a very sexual person, and I think it's important to like to explore how people even maybe define sex, right? Because sex is not just penetration and what the heteronormative assumptions are about sex. So I feel like that's very important for, especially for the disabled community, to like understand is like, how do you, what is touch? What is even like auditory or sensory forms of sexual activities that we could explore and have, because the brain is the biggest sex organ, so we can experience lots of fun stuff. But so back to your question, I'm sorry, defer, but yeah, so I was a very sexual person before my accident, and then I after my accident, I mean, I kind of like stopped keeping track sometimes. But I just wanted to explore and learn about myself again. So it was just kind of like, okay, who's going to help me do this? And I went to friends and I went to just random people because I kind of met either when I was out or, online or something like that, which probably wasn't the safest at the time. I don't know if maybe made a lot of dumb decisions, but I was always safe and I always got tested. So,
Uh, so how long did it take you to want to get back into the sexual realm and be okay with having a disability and having sex? And what did that look like?
so it started in rehab. It started in rehab. I,
Yeah,
so
because I've heard that they have like classes where you can have like penis pumps and they show you how to do all that. So for you, it was probably like I guess in Shepherd or wherever you're at. I guess you maybe took some classes or something.
yeah, so I did my rehabilitation at the Kessler Institute in New Jersey. Shout out to Dr. Kirschblum, amazing person. Um, the videos that they showed, so outdated. I even remember going back to my doctors and like physical therapists and being like, this needs updating. Like, what are you even showing me? You can't see anything, you can't hear anything. No one's explaining jack shit, right? It's like, and it was all heterosexual. So it's like, okay, guy on top, penis, vagina, and this is what sex is. And again, like it's not. It's not. But I have a spinal cord injury, so I don't have sensation like nipple down, but that's not always the case for other people. It's like if you have certain pain levels, how do you navigate pain and pleasure, right? So it's just none of that was informative. Um, I I fooled around with this one guy, but it was like both mutual because we were both like, how do we navigate our bodies? And so it was like him trying to figure out, okay, how can I get hard again? Like, does my penis still work? What does this look like? And then other people just kind of exploring their own bodies. And it started there. And that's where really the first time that I experimented in like even self masturbation.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question. I was gonna say, how do you make sure people with disabilities know it's okay to have sex again, and how do you bring humor into the situation if maybe they're not used to it for the first time? What's some ways that they could bring humor into it to make themselves okay? Like, how do you start working toward that?
Yeah, I feel like the best thing that we have are problem solvers. Like people with disabilities are great problem solvers. So figuring out how to do things, bringing humor in. Let's see. So those are great questions. I think sometimes we also just have to make light of situations, and I think if you can bring humor into your own self, then that's a tough one. Let's see. I mean, how do we gotta be able to laugh at ourselves, right? I also feel like that's a form of self care. It's a great coping mechanism as long as we're not internalizing it through sarcasm and it becomes a defense mechanism. But we have to be able to laugh at ourselves sometimes. Like, I shit on my now husband during sex. How can we not laugh at that? I mean, laugh at it, make it funny because that normalizes it a little bit and then it doesn't make it so scary. And I
Yeah,
think that's where humor can really be powerful, where it takes away that scariness and that fear. And it's like, it happens, it's going to happen, and it's okay. You will survive. Like, you will be okay.
yeah. So my next question is: has anybody ever turned you down because of your disability and being in a chair, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, yeah. Their loss. That's how I
The-
overcame that.
uh,
Their loss.
So how have you like managed to bring like if they try to turn you down because of your chair, how have you made somebody else feel more comfortable with you being in a chair that might be opposed to being with you because you're in a chair? How did you break the mold to show them that it's okay to talk to you, that you can have sex?
Mhm. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was definitely like just a notch on people's belts. Like, oh, I had sex with that disabled girl, and like that's okay. And at some point, you got to be okay with that too. You know, where like I'm okay with being that, but at the same time, I don't think you can really change. Like, you can educate. I think we're always educating, which can sometimes be exhausting. But I feel like if I'm not doing it, who is? There's nobody really else doing it. And at the end of the day, if they're just not going to give and not going to care, I think that just speaks to what type of person they are. And do I really want to surround myself around a person who's not going to care for disabled people? And or if they're going to care for me but not care for the fellow disabled person next to me, whether it's a same disability or not, right? I think that's where a lot of our disability community lacks in talking to each other too. So it's like we can't get our own fellow disabled people on the same page to kind of bring some type of collective action. How are we going to bring an able-bodied person into that sometimes?
So what I hear you say is you got to be comfortable with yourself before you can bring an able-bodied person into the conversation and make them okay with having sex or being intimate with you. If you're not comfortable with yourself, you can't expect them to be comfortable with you.
Yeah.
So talk about a time where you were in the bedroom and you were like your partner wanted to do something and you were uncomfortable with it. How did you overcome that being in a disability? Because I know some, and the reason why I ask this question is because I know sometimes there can be fears around being disabled and not speaking up for yourself and not saying what you feel. So how would you go about doing that for somebody that might be one of that wants to do something that you may not be comfortable with? I mean, I don't agree with just allowing them to do it, but what's your advice for somebody that's having sex for the first time that thinks that maybe they got to do it because their partner wants to do it? And how do you overcome that? What does that conversation look like? Just to give you a little background on why I asked that question.
Yeah. I feel like every encounter needs to be safe and consensual first and foremost. Um, so if you're not comfortable doing something, like don't do it. Have conversations about how can we make me feel safe before, right? Let's plan it out. What steps are we going to take? So if you want me to like get on top, let's say for an example, um, in the beginning, I wasn't very comfortable doing that because it was like, okay, how am I going to literally swing my leg over? How am I going to get into position? How am I going to hold myself up? So it's like planning these things, even if it's like continuous consent, where we're constantly asking, "Are you okay? Are you still okay? Are you still okay?" Right? And just checking in with our partners would be a great step. And just be honest because sex is supposed to be pleasurable, it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be safe and consensual, and it's not always. And the disability community is huge. I mean, this is a very valid question, right? Because we get abused all the time, whether it is sexual abuse or medical abuse, right? It's there, it's prevalent. So consent, be safe, don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. And I would
Yeah.
start with that.
Yeah. So, how do you think, in your opinion, we can make sex in the disability community less taboo? And what do we need to do to make it where it's more open for people with disabilities, where it's just one of those things we all do, and people are like, oh my God, no, we can't talk about that. Or as a parent, like, oh no, they can't have sex. Or no, like, that's not something we talk about. And the reason why I bring this question up is because I faced that. So, with you going into your field and your experience, how do you feel like what do we need to do to make it less taboo? And I know we had conversations outside of the podcast about how to do it, but for those that listen, what is your opinion and what do you think we need to do?
Yeah, I honestly think like a comprehensive, inclusive sex education could literally change the world. I think it's like put disability in sex education. Have parents, doctors and healthcare professionals learn more about disability and sex. Majority of like medical students don't even learn about disability, let alone disability and the intersections of intersectionality and sexuality. They're just not studying that. They're not learning that. It starts there. It starts with all these programs and being more inclusive and including us. And then it also starts with you and this podcast and getting word out there, right? You have other podcasts that are doing the same thing. You have books now that are coming out of people's stories and showing how to be intimate. You have pleasure activism, which is like another book that is part of the disability community and just taking back pleasure and like what that looks like. It starts with us. We got to amplify our own voices if no one else is doing it or encouraging us to. And it starts with sex education. Unfortunately, we live in a society where sex is really taboo. And then we live in a society where being disabled is really feared and looked down upon. And we have a historical relevance of like eugenics and sterilization. So we're battling a lot of battles here. We're battling our history, we're battling our current society, and it starts with just a simple thing of having this conversation. And I think you did a great job of just initiating it, right? And that's that's how we get our voices heard.
That's awesome. So what kind of products, or not products, but like what kind of information or help are you gonna offer when you get your degree, and where do you hope to go? What do you want to, how do you want to help people and teach them about sex? You want to help them in the bedroom? You want to help them outside the bedroom? You want to write literature? Like, what is some of the things you're gonna offer?
That is a great question. I have no idea. I want to do everything. I would love to have a business where I could allow like sex workers to go and help people with disabilities have sex, engage in pleasure. That would be amazing for assisted sexual expression. I would also love to photograph. Like I, before my accident, I was actually a photography major, and I think like doing some type of photo project just to put in maybe like the sex museum or another museum would be, I would love to do that. I'd still love to do, I love doing therapy. I love being a therapist. I love helping people through their problems, allowing them to gain insight into the changes that they want to make, and watching them do it. And it's beautiful. I also love doing research and amplifying people's voices through qualitative research. I feel like, how do we make changes besides studying it and showing that like we can experience sex and this is how. And that also shows that just people aren't alone in their own journey and own struggles. So what would I like to do? Everything, whether it's academia, being in charge of some of my own organization, and or working for a nonprofit that really caters to moving disability rights and disability justice forward. I'm on board there too.
I really think we need more sex therapists over here like they have in the UK, because I've done a lot of research around it myself, and they actually have people in the UK that will actually come in and help you have sex in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't only have sex, but they teach you how to put a condom on, what
Mm-hmm.
good touch, bad touch, what it's like to put a condom on, how to have safe sex. I think we
Yeah.
need more of that in America, because we don't have any of that over here. So that's why I'm really interested in the work you're doing, and I really hope that it goes that far, because I think you'll be one of the first ones to actually do it.
I mean, I would love for it to go that far, but we also live in America. And like where America is right now, it's not there. I mean, if you think about it too, the sex toy was the vibrator was originally created because a doctor was getting wrist cramps from um, servicing women due to hysteria, which was like a mental health condition of like stress in women back in Victoria era. And then women weren't even allowed to own sex toys, and it was only for men. And then you had to literally advertise it as like a product for the kitchen or like a massage or something. You couldn't even buy a sex toy, it was illegal for women. So it's like women have been, I think just this discrimination around sex in general has just a long history. And then you're talking, we're bringing in the disabled community, and then you're bringing in, like, again, intersectionality. So you have Black disabled people, you have um, people of color, you have Asian, you have white. I mean, you have all these people with different socioeconomic statuses and race and religion. And we
Yeah.
all got to get together and advocate for this. I mean, I feel like it's great, but we're not there yet. But I think like continuing to move this forward, we can get there. And I think it's amazing what some of the UK and other um, countries are doing in regards to like sexual assistance and sexual expression. That is a great thing. Um, they've been made sexual pleasure a human right in the past couple of years.
Yeah, in your opinion, what do they talk about kids with disabilities, their parents want them to have happy lives,
Mm.
do all this, and go to school and have dates. Why do you think they're so ashamed to talk about sex, and how do we make it more natural for people with disabilities? Because like you always want your kids to grow up and have kids and sexual
Mm-hmm.
experiences, but why do you think it's so taboo for the kids and the teenagers of disabled parents, and how do we break that mold? Because the reason why I ask this question is because I've even had girls that I date that are disabled, but where like their parents make jokes about it. Like, hey, we're gonna put you in the sex chair and we're gonna do this and do that, and they go in there and they have sex, and you hear the brother and all that having sex, but they don't see it for you, and they make jokes about you having sex, and I guess they're trying to make you normal, but really it only discourages somebody like me because I really want to do that, but they don't see it the same way. So how do we integrate them into being okay with it?
Hmm. Well, let me ask you, let me turn this back on you. How come you think that they're making fun of you, and what do you think their thoughts are about disabled people having sex in that instance?
I think they try to make it to where they try to make us normal by talking about it, but they don't actually see it happening. So
Hmm.
they're not gonna do the assisted part to make it happen. Like they're trying to make us normal by treating us and bringing us in the conversation, but they're not gonna do the things to help us do it because they don't see it happening, or maybe they're scared of us having kids or something. I don't know.
I think it's all of the above. It's all of that. It goes with the stereotypes, right? And it's people with disabilities are asexual, which undermines people who are actually asexual, right? Thinking that like it's not okay to be asexual. It is. But not everybody with a disability is asexual. Thinking that like we are like children or childlike. Thinking that we can't have sex or we don't want to have sex or maybe our parts just don't work. Um, there's all these stereotypes and misconceptions that lead people's thoughts about disability, and then therefore it's probably why parents, don't want their kids engaging in sexual activities. I mean, I don't have a kid currently to say that, but like we will be having the sex talk. We will be a sex positive family.
Yeah,
Um, but I think it's just scary too. Comes
yeah.
from a fear based thought.
Yeah. So my last question is, what do you think we need to do to raise awareness around like colleges and things like that?
Mm.
People that aren't disabled. What do you think we need to do to raise awareness around that disability community having sex? Like, what does that conversation look like? And if you could have a class in a college setting, now that you've been to school, what would that class look like? If you were going to go in and teach some kids that were in college, what would be the first thing you want to teach them?
Hmm. I think like I'd love to put on a disability history course just because I feel like that touches a lot of how disability is both feared but exploited for profit, and all that contradiction that comes with it, which kind of sets up the views for people today with disabilities. And then I wouldn't mind doing like a sexuality course that explores sex, disability, LGBT, right? Where we're again looking at all these intersections of people and I guess normalizing that disabled people can have sex. Sex education.
That's awesome. Well, that was my final question. It was great talking to you.
Hmm.
And I can't wait for people to see this episode. This episode's actually going to come out on Valentine's Day because I figured
Oh my gosh.
it's a great time to have this conversation and bring the disability world into Valentine's Day. So, yeah,
Well, then we have to ask people if it's coming out on Valentine's Day, and then how are we going to be sexy on Valentine's Day, whether that is yourself or with somebody else.
yeah, that's a poll question I'm going to ask right under the episode. How are you going to be sexy on Valentine's Day? And what does a date look like to you?
Yeah, sex positivity. Woohoo.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I thank you guys for listening, and I thank you for being on the podcast, Elizabeth, and it was great talking to you.
Yeah, sorry I was a little scatterbrained a little throughout there, everyone. So just like bear with me. This is my first podcast. It's very nerve wracking.
Yeah, it was nerve wracking the first time I did it, but you did great.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being on.
I appreciate it.
No problem.